getting rid of my coffee.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another SACPA session on this fine and beautiful summer day. SACPA acknowledges that this event takes place on the land of the Blackfoot people and Métis Nations of Alberta, Region 3, and we pay respect to their past, present, and future cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. SACPA commits to assist reconciliation efforts by raising awareness of the ways past and present injustices can be reconciled. SACPA would like to thank or is very thankful for the continuing support we receive from the University of Lethbridge, Shaw Spotlight, and the Lethbridge Herald. Today we have both Ken Rogers and Kelly Freewin with us on the topic of an educator's perspective on Alberta's proposed draft curriculum. Ken Rogers retired in 2018 from Lethbridge Collegiate Institute after a 32-year career in music teaching. He taught band, choir, guitar, and general music courses at middle, junior, and high school levels, as well as some elementary school music. He is taught at the post-secondary level, including music studio performance, choir, and music curriculum, and instruction courses at the U of L. He has a keen interest in music curriculum through his teaching career. In 2016, he was appointed as a member of the Alberta Education Art Curriculum Work Group, focusing on grades 9 to 12 music, and served until the group's suspension in 2019. He holds a B Music and a B Ed from the University of Lethbridge and a graduate diploma in Fine Arts from the U of C. Kelly Freewin, a Lethbridge educator for 20 years, received a B of Fine Arts in 1996 and an B of Education in 2001, and received the gold medal from the University of Lethbridge. He taught grades 5-6 multi-age classroom for 2 years, then transferred to Wilson Middle School, where he taught drama plus academic classes. In 2007, Kelly moved to the Lethbridge Collegiate Institute to teach the drama program. Kelly joined the Provincial Curriculum Work Group in 2016, consulting with Alberta Education on the new curriculum. I want to thank you both for coming. I realize I don't have your names on the screen. So Ken, wave to me. Ken, give us a wave. There you go. And then Kelly is in the blue checkered shirt. Okay, just to introduce everybody on the screen so we know who's who. And we very much look forward to your talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Annalise. Kelly and I decided I'll start. Yeah, my name is Ken. And thank you, Annalise, for helping us through all the technology, and thank you to SACPA for this opportunity. I want to begin by saying I speak only for myself today. I am not representing any organizations or institutions. And I'd like to begin with a little background. I consider myself a curriculum nerd, as I know Kelly does as well. And curriculum is not the kind of thing you read for fun. And even more so, it's not the kind of thing you write for fun. It takes a lot of work and a lot of research. But nevertheless, I'm proud of being a curriculum nerd and have been. I was very lucky to have a wonderful music ed professor at the University of Lethbridge in the mid-'80s who was very influential at that time in writing the new curriculum that was about to come out in 1988 when I was a young teacher. And she made sure we knew and understood this curriculum that was about to come out. We didn't learn just what was to be in it, but also why it was there and how it was intended to be navigated. And I have to say that was a pretty exciting proposition at that time, as the previous music curriculum in the early 1980s was just several pages of what nowadays we'd call front matter. There was nothing concrete or detailed for any educational outcomes. So music teachers were really on their own prior to this mid-'80s curriculum, and it was a huge shift for music education in Alberta. This new curriculum was optional in my first year of teaching in 1986, and I was still using that curriculum when I retired after 32 years, hence the need for some updating of a curriculum. There have been two unsuccessful attempts at a new music curriculum in the last 15 years, but as I said, all schools are still using the one that was released in the mid 1980s, and so we are very much in need of an update. I was asked for this session if I'd speak a little bit about our experiences on the expert working group. So I'll do that now. Kelly and I applied for that. We both taught at Lethbridge Collegiate. We're both arts teachers, and we were very interested, very passionate, as I said, nerds. So we applied and were accepted as members of the working groups that were planned to run from 2016 to 2022, a 6-year project, developing a comprehensive K to 12 curriculum for all subjects, except CTS, some of the optional subjects. But unfortunately, we were dissolved in 2019 following the provincial election. I'll ask Annalise to go to my slide number 1. And slide number 1 just shows a little bit of info about what a concept-based curriculum is. And the idea of devising a concept-based curriculum for Alberta, the history of that, it arose from a governmental desire for a comprehensive 21st century curriculum that was guided largely by a document called 2010 Inspiring Education Initiative under the PC Education Minister Hancock. And this document and this initiative stressed the engaged thinker and the engaged learner. And that's, you can imagine, that is probably one of the most important words in education, besides a student being safe, is that they are engaged. This was, and you can hold this slide just for a moment, Annalise, so people can have a chance to look. This was followed in 2013 by a ministerial order under PC Education Minister Johnson, which continued this stress of the engaged learner. All of this is quite unlike the knowledge-based 2020 draft that was released by the UCP Ministerial Grange. So what we were working under from 2016 to 2019 was clearly guided by these two frameworks that were based on 8 competencies on which we spent much time in our expert working groups with research and reflection. We spent a lot of time before we even started looking at specific subject or grade work. So the 8 competencies that continued through both of these documents, and we can go to the second slide now. Thank you. The second slide is from a 2013 document under that second initiative, under the Ministerial Order. So they are critical thinking, communication, problem solving, collaboration, managing information, which I note is knowledge, and you may have heard that about the current proposed curriculum, cultural and global citizenship, creativity and innovation, and personal growth and well-being. I'll ask Annalise to leave that slide up for a moment while I speak about a little bit about the process while we were up there in Edmonton working. There were over 300 educators involved in our process, and they came from all levels and all locales. They were mostly teachers, but there was also faculty from some post-secondary institutions. There were some division administrators who were involved in curriculum in their school divisions, and even some members from outside Alberta. As some of you know, there are outside jurisdictions that pay for and use Alberta's curriculum currently, including Northwest Territories. We had First Nations and Francophone members in all teams, and we worked in 4 main arts groups that we focused on: music, visual arts, drama, and dance. And we often worked in 3 main grade groupings. There was a K to 4 group, a grade 5 to 8 group, and a grade 9 to 12 group. We met 5 or 6 times a year in Edmonton, usually for 3 days at a time, occasionally 2. So you can imagine it was a real commitment as full-time teachers to plan and prepare for that much time away from our classrooms regularly. And then we also met once a year in July or August. It was extremely challenging work, but it was also very rewarding and required a lot of commitment. It was stressed to us that it was an iterative process, and I have to be honest, I had to look that word up at the first meeting. It simply means to revisit. So yes, we revisited our work regularly at our sessions every couple months, and we did our own research and our own reflection between sessions as it progressed. And Kelly, I'm sure will also note, it became clear as we worked in these groups that we were not writing the curriculum. That is purely the job of Alberta Education. But nevertheless, we could see our work as a group in the various drafts as the process unfolded. I think we could turn that slide off, Annalise. So a couple phrases that stood out in our work, at least in our arts group, and there were about 70 of us in the arts group, about 15 or 20 music people. One phrase was, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater," which reassured us all that, you know, we felt like we knew what should be done in our subjects, and they acknowledged that. And then another phrase was, "You don't need to reinvent the wheel." So, in other words, we were encouraged to use our own experience and our research to guide us in suggesting what to retain in the curriculum that we know already works. So there was no push to throw anything out. The goal was just to update for the 21st century. And as much as I can recall, there was no politicized ideological pressure, either on us as working groups or from anyone within the working groups. In fact, to the contrary, we were advised in the earlier sessions that if we had come in order to promote our own curricular agenda, that we might want to rethink our participation. You know, it was simply too big of a group, and it was too big of a process for any one of us to grind our own curriculum axe or even to push our own political stripe. I have to be honest, in my view, the whole process was very non-politicized, regardless of what one may read in recent reports. To continue with what our sessions were like, we were provided with endless digital links to research, and we had tables literally full of copies from the most recent arts curriculum research from around the world and resources, and we used these resources daily. And then also we're allowed to take them to do our own research between sessions. So the goal was clearly to create something truly word class. Our initial sessions were very global. We set parameters, we set common language, architecture, and the goals for K to 12, all subjects overall. But some subsequent sessions in years 2 and 3 were with the K to grade 4 team only, as they worked on the real nuts and bolts and details of those grades, to preparing for the 2018 release of the K to 4 draft, which was released. The grade 5, 8, and grade 9 to 12 team members, we would rejoin on occasion for review and refinement sessions so that we could comment on what we saw in the K to 4 curriculum and how that may impact moving through the years up to the grades we were sort of brought on for. And of course, if the project had seen its full 6 years, we would have had our own focus sessions for our grade groups. I also want to note that part of the design of the sessions included several meetings with all K to 4 subjects together, seeing how things were working cross-curricular within that grade grouping, and the 5 to 8 teams would meet all subjects together for reviews, the 9 to 12 teams would meet. And then we also had several sessions where we had all grades within one subject area meeting. So I bring that up just to note it was a thorough process where we had a chance to look at continuity, scope, and sequence, both across subjects and also within our subjects across grades. I also want to note, while Alberta Education was authorized, they were only authorized to release official information on the curriculum development as we worked, we were encouraged to discuss the developments and curricular ideas with colleagues in our home districts. And I took advantage of that. I met several times with local elementary music teachers one-on-one to get their feedback on what was being done in the K-4 work for music, even though I wasn't specifically on that team. So, in my opinion, the work we did from 2016 to 2019 was in every way a more thorough, collaborative, and non-politicized process compared to the 2020 draft process that I have seen released and described in the media. It had an appointed 12-member, the 2020 draft, and an appointed 12-member advisory council. And you may have heard in media that teacher involvement consisted of 2 days of review online just last September. And those teachers are not allowed to speak about that. They had to sign an NDA, so that is hardly transparent. Whereas the 2018 draft was created over 3 years just for 4 grades with input from hundreds of educators. And also it was reviewed very openly by over 100,000 Albertans. And that is the K-4 draft that has been thrown out. So I met with my Lethbridge East MLA 2 months ago, and at a group meeting on curriculum. It was a constituency meeting, and then we followed up with a private meeting last month in May at his invitation. So during that meeting, I asked him to really consider the difference in those numbers. In the recent UCP draft, basically the equivalent of 200 teacher days of review in a draft over 6 grades created by 12 appointed advisors, and compare that to over 5,000 teacher days of input from 26 to 2019 for 4 grades, and the review over 3 years leading to that draft. And I said to him at that time, I can't stress enough, to me, the difference in quality shows. It's glaring. The current draft, in my opinion, is simply too flawed to be edited or fixed, and I feel nothing short of a restart can address the problems. If we can go to slide 3, Annalise. In April, I responded to the government survey about the curriculum for feedback. It's not a good survey. It sort of limits your responses, but I let go in the comments. The more I looked at the grade 6 curriculum, which is the subject and grade I chose to comment on in the survey, you have to choose one subject and one grade, I just got hotter and hotter. So if you can see some of those comments and it sounds a little hot, yes, I got hot. So I shared this with my MLA at our private meeting. He had expressed interest in seeing that following the constituent meeting. And I really stressed to him in our private meeting that none of these errors and none of these misguided outcomes, I think, would have found their way into the curriculum we were working on 2619. There were simply too many experienced educators there, and we were reviewing every sentence, every detail multiple times. We could probably go to the second of those slides, Annalise. I just put that up to show that I did do my due diligence, and I did the government survey as requested, and maybe I said more than they wanted to hear. It's absurd. So Annalise, you can close those off at any time. The next thing I brought up with my MLA was I asked if he knew anything about an equivalent to the CDA curriculum development application that was being developed from 26 to 19. I asked if there was an equivalent in the 2020 curriculum. And he had let me know in the group constituent meeting that he was not aware of anything like that, but was interested. So we had our follow-up meeting. So I explained to him that from 26 to 2019, Alberta Education had a team of IT specialists at the back of every room. And again, 300 people working in big subject groups and IT specialists in every one of those rooms. At first, I thought they were just there to help us get on Wi-Fi, like Annalise helped us today. But eventually we worked, what they were doing was they were working in real time alongside us, developing this huge application that was intended to connect curricular outcomes across all grades, across all subjects, and connect those concepts for teachers. It is the most exciting thing that happened up there, in my opinion. It was a real game changer to have this concept-based curriculum all connected with this 21st century technology tool. We, as expert working group members, we had opportunities for direct input into this development of the CTA. We could get up at any point and walk to their table and make suggestions, and we could see those suggestions being enacted. It was really powerful. So the plan was to have it include links to all the resources and texts that will eventually follow a new pilot curriculum. And above that, it was going to include teacher-developed resources and lesson plans, which could be shared across every teacher in this province. And actually, I just got goosebumps right now thinking how incredible that would be to see a tool like that. And as far as I can tell in my research, there is nothing that the current government plans to release in that way, and my MLA has not advised me otherwise yet. Annalise, if we could go to slide 4. If anyone would like even more information on academic analyses of the 2020 draft, there are dozens at this website, and it's dedicated to nonpartisan analyses. Authors include curriculum experts from across Alberta and beyond, including from the University of Lethbridge, very noted professors and researchers. Of real note is a 174-page review by Edmonton Catholic School Districts, which concluded, I quote, "Conditions have not been met for a quality piloting process." That in review by Edmonton Catholic was created by over 100 teachers, administrators, and consultants from their division. They broke into 8 subject areas, 7 grade level groups from K to 6. They had an equity and diversity contributor. They had an inclusive education contributor. To me, absolutely more thorough and transparent than the 2-day teacher review that the UCP had last December. The Lethbridge School Division reviewed it and concluded, and I quote, "Alberta has been renowned for a world-class curriculum. The Board of Trustees does not believe it would be ethical or responsible to have our teachers and students navigate the proposed draft curriculum that has an abundance of content that is not age appropriate, fails to adequately address diversity, fails to further contemporary learning competencies, and lacks coherence and integration of ideas." Last time I checked, 56 of the 61 school boards in Alberta indicated they will not be piloting this K-6 curriculum. Yet, recently our government has indicated in the media they are proceeding with the pilot this fall. I went on to express my displeasure with my MLA of much of the misleading and misinformation I am seeing in the media, and asked him if he could take that to the top and do something about that. And I'll close with, I'm very concerned, even though I'm a high school teacher, I'm concerned about the K-6 curriculum. Every elementary teacher I speak with, and I stay in touch with lots of colleagues, is terrified, is the word they use of this curriculum. They feel helpless. They're in tears, they're losing sleep, they don't know how they'll manage this draft if it becomes reality one day. Fortunately, they don't have to this September, because Lethbridge will not pilot, nor Lethbridge Catholic, separate. So that what they're worried about is how to get through so much knowledge material, how to negotiate the age inappropriate content, what their assessments will look like, what resources will look like, having no time to explore the interests of their students and their classes, concern about student boredom, concern about lack of engagement, and most of all, what they say to me is, what effect will this draft have on the students who already struggle? I really thank you for this time to present, and I'll pass it off to my former colleague, Kelly Fruin.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it is an honor to be here, and I appreciate being invited to come along with you, Ken, with this one. Again, I need to reiterate, these are my own opinions, my own takes on it, and I am not in a position to speak for any other group, for the ATA or any of those groups. So I think I just want to reiterate what Ken said. Being part of that expert working group, or that curriculum working group, as we were called, was an incredible process, and there was so much work. And I think one of the words, as Ken was speaking, is we felt respected as professionals who knew our jobs, who went into the classroom every day. We were on the front line, and we were respected, and our opinions and our thoughts mattered. And I think that what we're feeling right now is educators who have been reading this draft, and from some of the comments I've heard from people who were involved in the other in the last group last December, or last fall, I can't remember the specific date, are feeling that they were disrespected, that they've somehow now been shot out of the process. When you look and read about curriculum design, research and designers talk about the fact that teachers are the frontline brick and mortar of what's going on in the classroom. So if we're not designing something that they go, yes, this reflects best teaching practice, this reflects what I see in my classroom, this reflects the students and the grade level and the age level, then we've got a serious disconnect. Rather than talk about the experience, I think Ken really did wrap it up quite nicely. Some of the points of concerns that have come out in the media around this that really have stuck with me is one, there was talks about the fact that they needed to revamp this curriculum because it was too based on discovery learning, and that they needed to go to tried, true, and tested teaching methods that gave better outcomes in math and reading. That was from the Premier at the beginning. I just want to point out that if you look at the 2018 PISA results for Alberta, we rated 3rd in the world in science, we rated 3rd in the world in reading, and we rated 8th in the world in math. And I think this is one of the reasons that we've seen the Alberta curriculum used in so many places actually around the world. When we're dealing with Canadian curriculum in other places, a lot of times they are using the Alberta curriculum. Were there flaws in the curriculum that we had before this? Yes. Was it dated? Yes. My drama curriculum came out and was implemented the year that I graduated high school, and it's problems with that. So what the discovery learning, I think, scares a lot of people. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're talking about here. When we talk about curriculum design, usually we're talking about two different philosophies that we tend to see worldwide. We talk about either an essentialism or a progressivism. And essentialism is what they're talking about as terms of going back to tried and true teaching practices. And a lot of this has been pushed by this core foundational knowledge that is being pushed forward and saying that this is the tried and true method. What this is more of an essentialistic view, which basically moves to a very specific demonstration of outcomes. It's called behavioralism outcomes. The students will do this. It's a very outdated design. It also goes back to a very prescriptive, you are going to do this project, you are going to do this specific task, which starts to take away the ability for teachers to gauge what their kids need classroom and to move into actual work that is going to be meaningful to them. It goes back to that whole idea of practice with drill and skill, and the idea that learners are passive receptacles of knowledge. Most curriculum developers and most curriculum textbooks at this point do say that this is an outdated practice. This refers back to sort of the back to basics push that happened in the late 70s, early 80s, and the outcomes worldwide of the groups that did this were actually quite low. It caused a lot of problems. So what happens is we've moved more into a progressivism where basically it's not about absorbing knowledge. This core foundation knowledge says that students can't learn until they have all of this knowledge and all of these facts dumped into them, memorized, and then they can work with it. And most researchers are saying that is actually not the case. Wiggins says that this approach does not develop deep understanding, which is key in moving forward, and that it's not, education is not something to be just drilled into a head. So with progressivism, we're starting to say what we need to do is we need to actually take the content that needs to be learned and put them in real world contexts that the students themselves can work with. So progressivism is not about the drill and skill, but about applying, about problem solving. When we start talking about scientific method, this is a progressivistic view. This is a view where there is an inquiry, where the students have questions, and the original curriculum that we were working on all was built on these guiding questions that the students and the teachers asked together and moved forward. Now, when we get into discovering learning, which is that key word that got thrown around and seemed to panic people, what we're talking about is an extreme form of progressivism, actually moving out in some ways, where basically the students can guide their own learning, and the teacher is there simply to facilitate, and whatever the kids want to learn and whatever they want to discover, the teacher will then go ahead and help with. I attribute it somewhat to some of the Montessori programs, or even the Summerhill program from back in the 60s, where students went in and learned what they want, when they wanted, how they wanted, and teachers were just there to provide materials. That is not what this curriculum was. And in fact, we have a real problem with that one, because that's learning by accident. That's discovering the content by accident. And one of the things that we really made sure of is that we had rigor, and that our content was very important. We were taking what we taught in our classrooms, looking at curricula from all around the world, current curriculum that was less than a year old in some cases, and seeing how are we looking at these understandings to build understanding. So basically, the curriculum that was being built is really a curriculum that was designed with current teaching practices. Right now, the current teaching practice is the understanding by design. It's the idea that we ask these big questions, that we have these core large world understandings that we then go in and apply the content to as we are questioning and delving in. And basically, we're teaching students to be researchers. We're teaching them to be critical. All of those 21st century skills, we actually had to write into our learning outcomes in the previous draft of the curriculum. As well as numeracy skills, as well as literacy skills. So every single outcome was very deeply thought out, and it was progressivist in nature, not essentialist, which is what the new knowledge core foundation is, leaning back towards. And so when we get those words thrown around, it starts to cause problems. Second point is, I know I'm really low on time here, the fact that one of the things that Minister Lagrange said at the beginning is that she was going to create a curriculum that was not politically biased. Later on, she changed this a little bit by saying she was going to have a new curriculum that was going to be less biased. I am a current master's student, and I am a research-based student, so I'm doing research. And any researcher who goes into a situation where somebody says, I'm being non-biased, I think warning flags are going to go up. Education is a political system. There is no way that education can be unbiased or less biased. When we went into our group, the biases were very clear in that the guides that we were given had very clear principles. The principles were based on inclusion. The principles were based on pluralism. They were based on diverse views. They included First Nations, Métis, Inuit ways of knowing. They included our Alberta Francophone population that has been, again, almostly written out. It was very clearly stated. We believe that education is for any and every student, regardless of background, regardless of diversity. So when I hear this, I worry about it. Dr. Ira Shaw states that no curriculum can be neutral. All forms of education are political because they enable or inhibit the questioning habits of students, thus developing or disabling their critical relation to knowledge, schooling, and society. It further goes on to say that the contents included and excluded in a curriculum are political choices. Whose history and whose literature is taught and whose is ignored. And that takes me into going through and looking at this curriculum. This is not a curriculum for reconciliation. We see what's going on in the world, and Chris Champion, who's been hired to work with the curriculum, states and is on record as saying that First Nation perspectives in the school are a fad. That is scary to me. To me, that says we have a major issue. The minute that we are starting to exclude or starting to shut down voices, that is wrong. I cannot speak to the Indigenous point of view. There are a lot of people that are doing it, and they are very concerned. I will say that Audrey Poitras from the Métis Nation said our citizens are shocked, and we are disheartened to see the input and collaboration reduced to nothing more than a side note in a draft that was presented to the public. When I look at the curriculum, it is filled with errors. It is not age appropriate. It is not appropriate. I have in our current drama curriculum, in the grammar curriculum that was proposed, they have grade 2 students learning in depth about Greek theater and asking them to portray some of the Greek comedies and tragedies. I have problems with doing a lot of those types of things with my high school students because of age appropriateness. So we're seeing a curriculum that has not been well thought out in terms of the age or the development of the students. It has become prescriptive, telling us what we are going to teach, the different things we're going to use, which means that we're being limited by our choice of how we educate. And as teachers, that becomes a very serious problem, especially with the plurality and diversity of the population in this province. And architecturally, the errors within it, if we start going down, we start to see that there are significant errors at all levels of that curriculum. Our previous curriculum invited the teachers as collaborators, not necessarily as equals. We were not writing, but we were collaborating, we were giving our input. And as we put that forward, we saw it back. Sometimes we disagreed, and there were some great heated debates and conversations throughout that process. But they were conversations, and we were heard. And sometimes the answer was, you know what, in this case, no, and there's justification. And we had to say, okay. Other times, we put those voices through, and they were heard, and we saw them. The next time we came back, a month later, 2 months later, in some cases 6 months later, we looked at the curriculum and went, oh yeah, there it is. We saw that involvement in that. If you take teachers out of the curriculum process, if you discount their professional knowledge, then I have a real serious problem with thinking that we're going to have a curriculum that is actually going to meet the 21st century needs of our students. And as has been stated in the media, we are going back, we're taking steps backward 30 years. And we are going from something that was considered a world-class education to something that people are not going to touch. Thank you.
Well, thank you both for this excellent presentation. It's amazing how much you both squeezed into half hour. It was well done. We'll jump in right away with the first question, which comes from Knut Peterson. With so much opposition to the new curriculum, what could happen if teachers simply keep using the present curriculum after the planned implementation in 2022? ... Sort of collective protest.
Good question. So at this point for the next year, it doesn't need to be implemented by the districts that are choosing not to. The problem after that is that as a teacher, I cannot choose not to teach a curriculum that has therefore become approved. So if this curriculum becomes approved, if it does go forward and moves out of the test phase into the implementation stage, as a teacher, as a school, as a district, we cannot just simply choose not to use that. I don't know what the ATA has planned in terms of responses to that or collective action. I'm not even going to guess because there's people who are paid a lot more than me to do those things and figure those things out. But I will tell you that right now I have a curriculum that's way too old. And what I have to do is use my teaching practices to augment the curriculum to teach it in a way that is meaningful for the students. I think that what's going to happen is we're going to have teachers that are going to have to increase their workload and have to work with a document that is inappropriate and somehow find ways to implement them in a way that still somehow meets those outcomes, but isn't, professionalism, we have a duty. Professionally, we are bound by what we are told to teach. So beyond that, I don't know. I don't know if there's any more there, Ken, that you want to add.
I just thanks, Kelly. I would add that things have changed over the years. When I went to school, I would have told you that the textbook I had on my desk was the curriculum, and I think some people don't understand that the textbook is a resource. Back in the day, we would plow through the textbook, and that seemed to be the course. But teachers have massive lists of outcomes to meet, and you are required by law to meet those outcomes, and you stray from the curriculum at your own peril. There have been famous cases in Alberta of teachers straying from the curriculum, and yeah, if it becomes de facto in September 2022, I shudder to think what's going to happen. I know some people talk about uprooting their families and leaving the province. They feel so strongly about it. Some teachers talk about quitting. Um, regardless, it's going to be a disaster if it happens, because I don't know how teachers are going to meet what's in the 2020 draft. Thanks.
The next question comes from Ian Hurdle. The original review spanned 3 different governments. Would you support a restart of the original pilot and process?
By original, meaning the 2018 K-4 draft?
Ian, could you clarify that for our speakers, please? But I'm assuming so.
Okay, yeah. If so, it's sort of funny in the group constituent meeting. I had asked about that revisiting. I'd mentioned to my MLA that the 2018 K-4 draft that was developed by hundreds of teachers and reviewed by over 100,000 Albertans, I noted that had been removed from the Alberta Education website. You couldn't even go to look at it to compare it if you wanted. I wasn't aware of that. As far as I know, it's still not on the website, but he did use the phrase, well, maybe we could dust that off. I don't know where that goes, but I would say at the very least, I also joked with him, I would love to get his 12 appointed counselors along with the 300 plus teachers together for an in-person meeting, and let's compare research. Yep. But anyways, that was a little snotty of me, but at the very least, I would hope that we can put these 2 documents up beside each other and have open discussion, research, and input from educators and the public. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. So I'm wondering if that's the question. The idea of pulling the 2018 out and starting over under the current government, I don't see any hope of that. Kelly?
Yeah, I'm, with the amount of money and time that's been spent, and again, this curriculum process started quite a number of years ago. So this is not an NDP or a PC document. Right. This is a curriculum by Alberta Education that has spanned governments. Do we need to go back to the starting board? I really don't think so, because the research has been done in those times. The resources were gathered. The work for starting that initial process was done and was being accepted. So to go back to square one, I think is now we're looking at a waste of money. I think that Alberta, I don't want to speak for Albertans, but I know as an Albertan taxpayer, I would go, with all the money we've spent, you want to start over again? I don't think we need to start over. I think we need to go back to where we left off, to where we had, in my opinion, good bones.
Okay. And Ian Hurdle basically responded with yes. So, yeah, good.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good guess.
Henning Mundel's question. Do you think that the pilot this coming school year has any chance of success, i.e. lead to full implementation without major modifications?
Here's my concern. You can correct me, Ken. I think there's 6 school districts in the entire province that said that they are going to, divisions that are going to pilot it. Is that correct?
Last I read and heard 5.
Okay. 5. Okay. So here's the main concern as they're going to push forward. What we have been told from Alberta Education is that if we are not piloting the draft curriculum, we are not allowed to put input into it beyond the survey that was open to the public.
Correct.
So basically, what we've been told is that if you want input, you have to pilot the curriculum. As we've seen, almost every district in the province is saying this is not a curriculum that can even be piloted. There are so much issues. I know that our superintendent has offered their suggestions back to the Alberta Education to say, hey, this is what you need to look at. But what's happened is we've got we're being shut down. If you're not on board, we don't get to hear your voices. And we've actually been told, I received information that as if we want to be part of the curriculum process, because they've now reopened the middle school and the high school calls for people to go in and review curriculum. From what we've been told, if you participate in that process, by default, you are now required to champion it and to be in support of it. So the idea, again, what's happening is we're being told that the minute we're involved in the process, we are approving it and okay with it. And if we don't want to be part of the process, if we don't want to pilot it, we're not allowed to have comments on it. So if those 5 school divisions like what they see, then it will be considered a success and successfully piloted, and therefore it's accepted by the province and by other district divisions. That's my understanding of it.
And I'll add to that, Kelly, the 5 school boards I'm aware that will be piloting represent, as far as I know, less than 4% of the students in Alberta. So that's what our government is going to act upon, feedback from less than 4% of the learners in this province.
So our next question comes from Mark Goodall. How can curriculum be implemented through all grades at the same time? Shouldn't it be implemented starting at K and streamed forward year to year? Or year after year, rather?
That's a good question. And both are ways of doing it. Implementing year by year and subject by subject is the history in Alberta and the tradition. And what that creates is, it can be haphazard. We were not involved, Kelly and I, in the decisions to develop everything. That was back in the 2000s and the early 2010s. But what I understand is that the decision to do K to 4 at once, followed by 5 to 8 at once, followed by 9 to 12 at once, was to enable these cross-subject and cross-grade connections. And it was to get all the subjects and all the grades together in the same room for a very thorough process so that we could develop these connections among the various curricula. That all aligned with the 2 documents that I showed with the engaged learner and the competencies. And that comes back to what a concept-based curriculum is. So yes, I can understand, really wondering, well, how is this going to be done all at once? It costs more, and it will cost more at once for resources, but it enables all those connections and those cross-curricular scope and sequence concepts. Kelly, more on that?
Just my thought is at that point, what happens is you see any concerns, any things that need to be addressed all at once, as opposed to each year individually. And something that we realize at grade 4, if you have to go all the way back 4 years later to K to change, it starts to cause some of those problems. There would have been growing pains. I believe there would have been growing pains. I mean, anytime there's new implementation like that, there's a lot of learning and a lot of hours that teachers and district staff have to put in to make sure that everything is in place so that we have successful schools, successful students. But again, with the design of the curriculum that we were looking at when Ken and I were working on it, I think it allowed for that to be implemented with as little pain as any process would be.
Kelly, I should add, that cross-curricular has been something that's been increasing for a long time to help kids make connections across subject areas for deeper understanding, deeper learning. And currently, and my whole career, it was a bit like a treasure hunt. I would have my music curriculum and I could send emails out or go digging through other people's massive 100-page curricula, trying to find that little gem where, it would be authorized within each person's curriculum that maybe English and social could work on a cross-disciplinary project. And this sort of ties into anybody in post-secondary nowadays knows these multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary degrees and research is becoming more and more valued. So I think it was the school, Alberta education responding to that, moving into the 21st century.
Our next question comes from William Ratz. My question is, how does the UCP consider their party a representative of the people when they have not listened to any of the people's input as long as they have been in power?
Yes.
Good question.
Good, absolutely. I think will ask the exact same question. And I would love somebody to answer me.
That is why the word terrified comes up. It really is sheer terror. I get emotional about it. I am worried about students. I don't know what's going to happen if this curriculum becomes reality. And I'm no longer teaching, and my own children do not live in this province. I do not have a personal vested interest in this other than fear for coming generations.
Yeah, I exactly.
I would like to ask a question. We often talk about privilege, and certainly in a community that I represent, we often talk about privilege. And one of the ways that I often describe that is a horse with blinders on. And so you just see this particular vision that your blinders, right? And this blinders just, they gray out or darken out this whole other perspective, this other lens, right? So how in curriculum development can you actually include some of these voices that one particular lens, say a white lens or a male lens or a heterosexual lens, may not actually encompass? How do you do that in curriculum development?
If I may, Ken, I'll start. I think that is exactly one of our concerns with what we're seeing in this draft curriculum. When we start looking at the content, it's gone back to a very Eurocentric, dominant viewpoint. A lot of the knowledge that we have to know is pulling straight from history of Western civilization through that. So we've gone back to they've gone to a draft that silences voices, that keeps the dominant status quo and focuses only on that as representative. As I mentioned with the curriculum design, what's left out is as important. And what we really focused on in developing our essential understandings, our questions, and our learning outcomes is that those questions could be understood by a student who lives in northern Alberta and can apply their own, whether it's Indigenous, whether it's Francophone, whether it's male or female, their own perspective into that answer. And as the same as a student here in southern Alberta. And I think what we are seeing now is that those voices are being silent. If anything, they're more of a footnote on the side. And with that happening, we've gone back to a very white, very male, very Eurocentric, absolutely very privileged curriculum. So if you are part of that dominant group, you will see yourself represented in the curriculum, otherwise you won't. So the previous design was really taking account from that. The essential questions and the essential understandings and the guiding questions in the curriculum that we were working on, they had no right answer. There was many answers. And that is our reality. And I mean, that is part of 21st century learning. There is no right or wrong answer. Yes, we can use a calculator and punch in the math. and that is a right answer, but that is not how life works. That is not how our world works. We have much bigger issues, much bigger questions, many different points of view that, it's the whole idea of three blind men being introduced to an elephant. They each touch a different part of the elephant and have a different understanding. None of them are wrong. And so the previous draft of the curriculum was applying that it was in the principles, the idea that we have this pluralistic society, this diverse society, and every single person needed to see themselves in that curriculum and be able to work with that curriculum in a meaningful way that made them feel part, be a citizen of Alberta, and that's missing.
Thanks, Kelly. And I would add, Annalise, I love the metaphor of the horse blinders, because during the 3 years up there, I'm sure Kelly would agree, our own personal horse blinders were mercilessly ripped off against, I shouldn't say against our will, but unexpectedly. It was recurring, the number of perspectives and the opportunity to discuss and engage and argue over things was extremely valuable. And I was sort of chuckling to myself because if anybody ever wanted a real thrill talking about curriculum nerds, you might want to join Kelly and I in the car for the 5-hour drive to Edmonton and the 5-hour back every 2 months, and that's all we would talk about. And in retrospect, I really value that time to reflect. It was extra value for our experience.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We have 5 more minutes, and we have 4 questions left in the queue.
Okay.
Knut Peterson, any U of L education professor. Sorry, I'll start again. I messed that up. Any U of L education professor part of the present curriculum advisory group?
Not the 12 appointed council, no. And I don't believe either from the 100 reviewers, because I saw that list and I might be wrong, but I believe they were all school educators. Okay. There are University of Lethbridge professors commenting on that analysis website. Dr. Robin Bright has been quite outspoken and eloquent, and I know for a fact that there were University of Lethbridge professors involved in the 2016 to 19 process that led to the 2018 draft. I hope that answers that.
Bart Phillips, can you comment on the irony that the new draft curriculum stresses rote, memorization, and historical data, which appears to be the exact opposite of what our children need in this age of technology?
Yes, it's beyond ironic, it's tragic. And to me, the irony beyond that is the amount of which it is plagiarized. We didn't mention that. Much of it is torn from Virginia curriculum and other US sources, curriculums that have been shown by broader research to have failed in the larger sense. So that's the irony, is much of what they're promoting is stolen, and yet we can give a student a 0 for plagiarizing. Lots of teachers have said our government deserves a 0 for plagiarizing. Kelly?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's in my opinion, it feels like there was uneducated people involved in making these choices who did not understand curriculum development, plain and simple.
Our next question comes from Knut Peterson. Are private and chartered schools playing a part in this issue, and will any of them be testing the new curriculum?
I don't know if they'll be testing. To the extent that they are influencing, some people really think the ultimate goal is to deconstruct public and separate education in Alberta, bring the system to its knees, and basically have a 2-tiered education system where the wealthy have a good education and the unwealthy get an inferior education and are obedient workers. ignorant, obedient workers.
Yeah. And again, what's not written is as important as what is written. So the whole idea that one of the first things that happened is that the word public was taken out of the Alberta education. It is no longer Alberta public education. It is Alberta education, and I think that's speaking volumes.
It's such a simple word, eh?
Yes,
it is.
With so much meaning. Our last question comes from Belinda Crowson. How important is Mark Kenny in the history of Alberta music?
I can speak to that. I actually played a gig with Mark Kenny at Waterton at the Prince of Wales Hotel many years ago. At the end of his career, he was a real gentleman in the band. To be honest, we were all terrified he might pass at the moment playing his instrument. He was very old. But he took his clarinet out and played a couple of his tunes for us. And then I remember some of the older members in the band talking about the old days. Mark Kenny was the Lawrence Welk of his day in Canada, or the Guy Lombardo, a great businessman, but his music was popular stream. It is not considered jazz. So I don't want to diss Mark Kenny. He has a place in Alberta music history. But being included as one of the two main influences in jazz, avoiding or ignoring people like Tommy Banks or Oscar Peterson, or the list goes on of Canadian musicians, particularly African Canadian or African American musicians to whom we owe the origins of jazz, is the crime. If Mark Kenny has a place in a curriculum, it is a unique, at the earliest, a high school pop music history course, not even jazz, and more properly, a footnote in a university course. Why Jason Kenney's grandfather is in the curriculum is beyond me. And Belinda might want to go check out the lyrics to that Calgary song that is referred to in the grade 6 music curriculum. It's absolutely inappropriate to study those lyrics with grade 6 students, in my opinion.
Okay, lots of thank yous in the queue from Bev Mandel, Bart Phillips, William Ratz. Thank you, Ken and Kelly, for all your knowledge and insights into this scam of a curriculum presentation by the UCP party of plagiarism and entitlement. Just the list goes on of thank yous. Before we wrap up today's session, could you give us a take-home message, please, for our viewers?
We are not out of the woods anywhere near with this, from what I can see. This curriculum could very, very realistically become a fact, and it needs to be fought tooth and nail at every level. So please, everyone, write the minister, write your MLA, CC the education opposition critic, and CC any media you know, so that it is recorded that your thoughts have been stated. Thank you.
Yeah, teachers' voices, the Alberta Teachers Association's voices are really being ignored or silenced in this process. So it really is now coming down to the need for parents, community members, anybody who has a vested interest in the future of our children to start stepping forward. To step forward more. There is a lot of public outcry, and I think that we need more, and it needs to increase, especially over these next 2 years.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of SACPA and clearly also all our viewers, thank you so much for your time today and for your excellent presentation. Before we wrap up, I'd just like to remind everybody that this was our last session. We will finish off on Tuesday, June 29th, with our annual general meeting. That starts at 10 a.m. For all of you who won't be joining in, we will see you back again in September. Thank you, and thank you both again.
Thank you.
Thank you.